Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today it's time for another Games Leaving the Collection video, this time for Games Leaving the Collection in, well, March. And to start us off, we're going to start off big but small. We're going to start off with Clank Legacy, more specifically, Acquisitions Incorporated. Now this, on the one hand, is a game that you'd expect to see on a Games Leaving the Collection video because it is, after all, Clank Legacy. It's a legacy game, and granted, sure, you can play it after you're done, which is more and more a trend amongst legacy systems, but despite the fact that you could play a legacy game after you're done, many people just don't. But in my case, the reason this one's more interesting is because we're not done. We're 5 missions in, and we just don't really feel the need to continue it further. Clank Legacy it's one that started off strong, but the more we played it, the more we found that every game was an exercise in around 30 minutes of gameplay and 30 minutes of alternating and interrupting your gameplay to put stickers on the board, to read from the book, giving a lot of things that many people would enjoy, many people would want out of a legacy game, but for us just bogged down the gameplay, which is the core thing we're looking for. I like the way Pandemic Legacy did it, that for the most part your interruptions were in between games and not as much in the game. Clank Legacy, it's like, get everyone ready, everyone set up, you're all ready to go, open the book and spend the next 17 minutes putting stickers on the map. Get up to a part and read 3 different chapters, which proceeds to you reading another chapter and another chapter. The in-between game state elements didn't add so much as distract from the core gameplay, and by the time we were 5 missions in, we were looking at each other for that 6th mission and saying, you know what, we have a choice. We can power through the remaining missions. It's not bad. It's not the worst thing we do with our time. Or we could look at the other many games that we love or that are new to us, that we want to get to the table, and we can play those instead. And with the premise of 5 or 6 missions of Clank Legacy left to go, we all kind of just said that we're not going to go for it. Now, disclaimer, by the way, I am someone who was never pulled in by the Clank system to begin with. I always thought it was fine and not great, so I would argue that if you are someone who loves Clank, then this game may still be enough to pull you in. For myself, the redeeming quality of this game was always going to be that it was a game that I was okay with, but with Legacy, and I generally like Legacy. This is one of those few times where Legacy to me added maintenance and frustration as opposed to an evolving game state that I found rewarding. And so ultimately, Clank Legacy is leaving our collection unplayed. Given the fact that it's a legacy game, it's not really going on the trade or sell pile because we are 5 missions in, but it will be going away. From there, we're going to have Court of Miracles. Now, there are a few games, I think 3-4 games in today's 10 games, that are games that I have done reviews on. More and more, I'm trying to do reviews of games that are leaving the collection, but only when I've actually played it enough. Speaking of which, Clank Legacy will probably not be getting a review. It's a slight chance it will be, probably not, because I just find it harder to give a proper review of a legacy game while maintaining spoiler-free aspects and properly covering the game, and so it just seems like more work than I really want to dive into. That said, Court of Miracles is one that I did manage to get a bunch of plays in, and so while it was an intriguing game, while it's a game system that I liked, while it's a game system that I enjoyed, it's one that after a few plays, I decided I was kind of done with it. It's simple, it's elegant, it's clean. That first game was fun, that second game was better, that third game was the same as the second, and that fourth game was the same as the second. It didn't really evolve so much as show me that the decision tree that the game offered wasn't to the extent that I wanted. In this game, in Court of Miracles, what you are effectively doing is you are fighting an area control game in a small localized neighborhood as you put down different tokens to see who wins, to see who steals money from other players, to navigate, to win rewards, to become lord of a neighborhood so that you can get the taxes as other players go there. It is an interesting system that is very tight in the implementation that it is doing, but ultimately one that didn't give us enough decision space as far as how to actually do things or how to proceed or grow within the game state. And so it's one that, while fine, while I enjoyed it, it's not one that I feel the need to stay. From there, we're going to have Castles of Tuscany, if I can actually grab it off that box. Castles of Tuscany. This is one that I reviewed a while ago with Rena. This is one that is leaving the collection because I was looking around my shelves to see what else leaves, and Rena happened to be walking by, and I said, Tuscany? And she's like, nope, it can go. Just straight up conversation. She saw the games on the table, she knew what was happening, and Tuscany was always one that when we reviewed it, we said at the end of the video, it's basically a worse version of Castles of Burgundy to us, and the only redeeming quality it has is the accessibility of, well, maybe we'll pull it off the shelf more often than Castles of Burgundy because it is shorter, it's easier, it's lighter, and that's a good thing, right? But sure enough, we just pull other lighter games off the shelf when we want something lighter to play, when we want something that's a little bit shorter. And this is not too short. This is not a half-hour long game. It's a 60-minute long game instead of a 2-hour long game. So it's a good improvement on time. but it didn't give us the rewarding experience either. Again, we covered this fully in the review. The only real question was how it would hold up over time, and we haven't really so much as glanced at it, either one of us, in terms of pulling it off the shelf. So Castles of Tuscany goes. I think it's a solid game. It's upside down right now. I think it's a solid game that is intimidated by its big brother. It's intimidated and outshunned, outperformed by Castles of Burgundy, which we both believe does it much better. From there, we're going to have Santa Monica, another one that I just recently reviewed. This is going to be by AEG, and Santa Monica is a light game in which you are building out a boardwalk, so to speak. You're building out both the boardwalk and the sea pass and connecting them all and trying to score as you move people around, or you get cards that give you different scoring objectives, how you take those cards and line them up to do different things that will score you points, earn you various coins to use on different abilities, earn you tourists so you can move them around the board. It's a very simple, light scoring game in which you're trying to balance different things to score off one another. Ultimately, I prefer other games. I prefer games that, like Nova Luna, that have a similar element but a much cleaner, quicker system. Santa Maria to me is a little bit, thematically, it's interesting. Thematically, it's light, it's breezy, it will pull people in. I'm sure there will be many people who find themselves pulled in by the theme. For ourselves, we got in a few games and we called it quits. We felt it was a fun, solid game that didn't offer enough depth or perhaps enough theme that we were personally pulled in by to ultimately stay in the collection. From there, we're going to have Cuzco, or Cusco. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing this one correctly. This is another one that we had, or I had a review of recently, and Cusco is a game that I have no interest in playing again, which is the way I put it in the review, although given a specific set of circumstances in which there are no other games, I would play it again, because it's not that it was bad, it's just that it was, the way I put it, it's a 90-minute long abstract game. In Cusco, you are developing the board, and it is one of the prettiest boards I have ever seen develop in a board game. As you start slowly but surely building out the board, and as you build from layer to layer, and so slowly build those temples and block of areas and put more and more meeples on the board, it is one of the most beautiful boards that I have seen develop in a game. If you haven't watched my review, check it out. I start the review off with the end game state from the prior game we finished right before the review. And it's really, really, really beautiful to watch. But that is where all the positive praise sort of stops, because after that part comes to the fact that it is a 90-minute long abstract. It's a 90-minute long experience, and if I put this here, no, I can min-max this here, no, I have 6 action points, I'm going to spend this to do this. It is very dry and overly thinky, and the payoff just isn't there, combined with a few other critiques that I get into my review, such as the fact that the end game scoring is so much more impactful than all the thinkiness you're going to go through the entire game. If you're going to spend time being too thinky, do it in the last 20 minutes of the game, because that's where most of the points will come in. You can have a solid game, but if you have a better end game, you will ultimately win. Think Harry Potter and the Golden Snitch or whatever it is. Ultimately, most of the points will be scored at the end of the game. But again, my bigger problem is going to be just the 90-minute long abstract experience that I didn't really sign up for. For myself, if I want to play something that feels like Cusco, that does all the highs of Cusco, but is a better game, for me that's going to be Tigris and Euphrates. Now, Tigris and Euphrates is not nearly as pretty in the development of that game, but other than that, it's better across the board. From there, we have Downforce. Downforce is going to be one that I talked about in my 10 worst games in my collection video, and those 10 games are slowly but surely going to be dropping from my collection. I don't know which ones at which points, but I've definitely been eyeing all of them. You see, the sad reality, and I talk about this a lot, is the more I do, for me, this is always a problem for me. I've always been someone that turned over games, don't get me wrong, but the more I have moved and migrated into content creation, the more I have more games coming my way, more games that are being sent from publishers. I'm both getting the games I already get, I'm getting all the Kickstarters that come in, and plus I'm getting games from publishers as well to review, which means I'm on track to play 250 new games in 2021, and I like a lot of them. And so that means whenever I like another game, I mean, there's a handful. Cubitos, which I did another video on recently. Cubitos is a great game, solid fun, really enjoying it. But that means I have to look at something else and wonder what's leaving, what game is leaving the collection if I have another game that's entering the collection. That's not, I don't keep a firm one-for-one relationship, but I do keep the general idea that there's not enough time and lots of fun games. And so all those games that I talked about in the top 10 worst games in my collection video are definitely up for, not for grabs so much as up for leaving. That is all a long distraction from Downforce. Downforce is a game that is a racing game that is solid, but also it has two problems. It has two specific problems. The first is going to be that it involves writing. Now, as a religious Jew, that means I don't write on Saturday. I don't use any utensils, or not utensils, I don't use any writing implements or whatever it is to write on Saturday. So we can't play it on Saturday, which is when 80% of my game time happens. Usually over the weekend, I am shut off from all electronics, and I get a good 80%, I don't know, maybe maybe 70 to 80% of my gaming happens over the weekend when I have no other distractions such as work, filming videos, editing videos, work, or other types of things. So any game that involves an app, any game that involves writing is already fighting a slightly uphill battle and just in the way I spend my game time personally. And so Downforce has that problem to begin with. The second problem is Downforce is also a lighter weight game. Usually, most of my games that I play on Saturday are of the lighter variety. The nature of my Saturday afternoons or Saturday evenings is we generally have our dedicated, longer, heavier games at night when kids are asleep. And when kids are awake, we play lighter, shorter games so that I'm not blocked off from, being available to help or do whatever for 4 hours long playing Brass Birmingham. And Downforce is a game that is in the lighter side and has writing, just means that I just never really look at it to pull off the shelf. It's fine. It's not bad. It's not amazing. It's a fine game, but I never really have the opportunity to pull it off the shelf. And that's why Downforce is leaving the collection. Moving on from there, we have I'll do this one. We have Domaine. Domaine is the one that I am most personally surprised by on this list. Domaine is a game that I have fought for a long time. Domaine is an excellent game, one that I frequently recommend. This is going to be the Catan that never was. A game designed by Klaus Tauber that gives you a simple game that has so much depth in the way the game plays out, and the narrow amount of cards you have on the table, and the way you need to build out your domains and push into other people's territory, conquer your own, to betray other people's units and take their horses from them and their strength and all that. Domaine is incredibly solid. It is incredibly fun, and I've had it in my collection since 2012. This is a game that has lasted for a long, long, long time, and it's one that we do pull out infrequently. Not often, but maybe once a year, Domaine hits the table. Maybe once a year, we have the combination of people that we want to pull it out. At the end of the day, Domaine's not leaving because it's a bad game. Domaine's leaving for the same reason that many games will leave over the next year, over the next 2 years, over the next whatever. Domaine's a really, really, really good game, but I have played it a lot. A lot's relative, but I've probably played Domaine 30, 40 times over the course of the past 8 years. And it's one that, because I've played it so much, I often find that it doesn't hit the table as often with newer players because it is primarily suited as a good game for newer players, but it's also a cutthroat game for newer players, and one that I have played out, and it doesn't have enough variation where I can try new strategies all the time or whatever it is. It's one that I have to teach somebody so that they can be competitive in, and then try to mess with them, and then they have to be competitive, we have to play it again, and then it takes a few plays before someone really wants to play it. It doesn't have that gap that I've had with Galaxy Truckers, don't get me wrong. It doesn't have that gap where in Galaxy Truckers, if you don't know, it's a game where I destroy people because I've played the app way too much, which is why I eventually got rid of it. But Domaine is one that doesn't have that problem, but there's still a gap. It's still a mean game that you need to onboard people to it, and it's one that doesn't hit the table as often as I would like because of that. It's a solid game. I really, from all the games on this table that I would personally recommend as this is an amazing game, you should play it, I feel that way about Domaine. But amazing or not, I think I'm moving on from it. Next up, we have Wingspan. This one's going to be less of a surprise in general. Wingspan is a upside down game, apparently. Wingspan is a game by Stonemaier Games, and Stonemaier Games in general have never really lasted in my collection. I do need to get Viticulture to the table. That is one that I've heard good things about, and I did like Charterstone. Charterstone is actually my favorite Wingspan game, Stonemaier game, as far as their games that I've played. Not that it's an amazing game, but it was a solid legacy system that I enjoyed playing through all the way to the end. But other games in the Stonemaier set, I've been hit or miss on. I've tried them multiple times. I got back Tapestry to try it, and I liked it, but I got rid of it again. I got back Wingspan, and I liked it, but I got rid of it again. I don't remember offhand. Scythe I've played multiple times in multiple iterations. I had my copy once, then I played a friend's copy down the road. Never really felt the need to keep it or own it. What other games in the Stonemaier library? I don't know which ones I've played or not. But ultimately, this all comes down to the fact that Wingspan versus Everdell. I did a video, Wingspan versus Everdell. At the time, I said I have room for both in my collection, and that was mostly true, because for myself, I always prefer Everdell. There's no time or instance in which I would pull Wingspan off the shelf, given my own set of preferences for the two games that I prefer. They both have tableau building, they're both beautiful, they're both deluxeified, they're both simple, they're both rewarding. But I have a bunch of small complaints about Wingspan that I don't have about Everdell. It's not that Wingspan is bad, it's just that given the two game systems, I'd rather play Everdell every single time. The redeeming quality that Wingspan did have is that I think Wingspan is an easier game to get new players in. It's a little bit more suitable in terms of that easy access for new people. But we don't really have that many new people at our game table. And when we do, we have plenty of other games that are totally fine for introducing new people too. Wingspan is great, don't get me wrong. But we have many other games that are great that I think that I personally enjoy more, that I don't look at and think I'd rather be playing Everdell. And so Wingspan is leaving my collection for the second time. But I still think it's a good game. I still recommend it. It's not Everdell for me. Next up, we have Cosmic Encounter. If I can grab this box and slide along, this has every single thing inside it, including a broken token, which I'm not going to pull everything out for, including a broken token and everything. And like Wingspan before it, this is one that I've had in the past. I eventually gifted it to a friend. I gifted my copy to a friend who loved the game, absolutely loves this game, and it's one where we played it a lot. I should not be putting this on the side. It's probably going to knock all kinds of things over. But Cosmic Encounter is one that I got rid of it because, as good as it is, and Cosmic Encounter, for those who don't know, is going to be a negotiation space-based game which you are trying to get 5 colonies before your opponents, and it ultimately comes down to having encounters where you invite people, and your defender invites their own people as well, and so you have these allies forming around the table as you attack each colony. It's about managing your powers. Cosmic Encounter's strong point, the point that I missed, and the point that I'm going to continue to miss, and the point that I want to kind of keep it because of it, is this is a box full of like 150 unique alien powers, and every game you're going to have one alien power that's assigned to you that's going to break the game in a different way, and it's going to be so entertaining. Most of them are so entertaining in the way they break the game and the way they mix up that game state and provide you something you can do that other people can't. And then from there it's about playing cards, negotiating, backstabbing, betraying, and learning the nuances of the system and of the players, and it's one that I loved for a long time and eventually got rid of it, and I got it back because it's so good. And I said, like, I gifted it to a friend because I didn't want it to leave our collection, so I gave it to him because it was his favorite game. But then I got it back because I kind of wanted to have it again, but now I'm getting rid of it because when it does hit the table, it seems to have that problem. This is why I got rid of it the first time. I like it so much that I forgot and got it back, which is that it only really works well, in my opinion, with people who know the game well, with people who have played the game a lot and know it well. When you're playing with new players, you're ultimately going to have to teach them the game, then you're going to have to assign other people aliens, and then you have to teach them all their aliens, and all the way those 5 different people around the table break the rules. And I say 5 because 4 is too few and 6 is too many, and you really need 5 in my opinion. And so it doesn't really work well as a game that you're going to play infrequently. It works well as a game you're going to play more frequently with those players. Additionally, it has the problem, and this is again a problem if you're playing it infrequently, it additionally has the problem that sometimes you can play an entire round of Cosmic Encounter and the game will end before you ever get your official turn. The way you can be involved in everyone's turn means you may never have the opportunity to have your full dedicated turn before the first player manages to have gotten their own 2 colonies and allied with enough people and backstabbed and betrayed and whatever it is to make their way towards a final colony. And so the game can be a little too short sometimes, or the flip side is it can also drag on far too long. It's a little bit too variable in what the game is bringing to the table in terms of those game lengths, in terms of the accessibility for new players, in terms of the depth and the whatever it is. So ultimately, Cosmic Encounter is one that I really enjoy it. But it's one that I happily sit down at any convention and play with a bunch of people who know the game and they want to just jump into it. You know, sitting down and playing all these alien powers. It's a cool system. It really, really is a cool system. But it's not as accessible as I would like for actually being able to pull it out and being confident that everyone at the table is going to have a good time playing it. I have had some incredible highs playing Cosmic Encounter, but I've also had many games where people at the table just didn't seem to be enjoying themselves, and that's not a game I'm going to keep at the moment. And lastly and finally, and this is a big one theoretically, unless of course you watched yesterday's video, which is going to be Rising Sun. If you watched yesterday's video, Rising Sun versus Blood Rage, play this, not that. Rising Sun is leaving the collection. Let's see if I can flip this around. So Rising Sun is going to be an area control game from Eric Lang, from Come from art by Adrian Smith, the miniatures by Studio McVeigh, and I think the miniatures are Studio McVeigh. I'm pretty sure it is. I said so in yesterday's video, so I sure hope I'm right. But Rising Sun is one that I backed the Kickstarter way back in the day because I was excited to get this one. This was a big deal for me. This was Rising Sun, the spiritual successor to Blood Rage, a game that I absolutely loved, and so I needed to get it, and so I backed it, and it was one of my first like big box Kickstarters before I really got sucked in. I mean, Hate came after this, and I kind of ignored that. I was like, oh, who cares about this Hate game? Then Cthulhu Death May Die came after that, and that's when I fell down the rabbit hole. But ultimately, Rising Sun is one that I absolutely had to get because of Blood Rage, and then I got it, and we played it a few times, and it was good, but it wasn't great, and I spent the next 4 years not pulling it out, but always meaning to, always trying to, and never really just having the opportunity. And then A few weeks ago, we managed to get another 3 plays in over the weekend. We played with a few people, and we basically managed to get 3 more plays in over the weekend, and it was okay. It wasn't amazing. It was a good game that I would rather have spent that time playing Blood Rage. If you want the full breakdown as to the why, the ifs, the hows, why Blood Rage does this better in a way that I don't think Rising Sun does, then watch yesterday's video, The Play This Not That. I go into it in depth. The short version, if you want the cliff notes, is going to be Blood Rage has drafting, Blood Rage has more rewarding combat, Blood Rage does not make me feel like I drafted or acquired a monster only to have it taken with a hostage, and it feels so frustrating. I go into a lot more depth, but those are going to be the 3 highs as to why Blood Rage is the better game for me every time. Rising Sun is good. Rising Sun does bring things to the table that Blood Rage does not, at least in my opinion, but none of those things compare to the lows of Rising Sun. I'm curious to see how Ankh will do, because Ankh is going to be coming to me from, commands, the 3rd in the trilogy of these Eric Lang area control based games, and so I am intrigued as to how Ankh will do and whether it will hold up. At the end of the day, it doesn't have drafting, so it's fighting an uphill battle already. But we'll see. Time will tell, and we'll see when that Kickstarter arrives. That is basically it. This is March culling list. 10 games leaving the collection in March. These lists will continue to be, well, a monthly thing, because as long as I'm getting games in, there will be games leaving the collection, rest assured. Both games that are new to me that didn't make the cut, such as Clank, Court of Miracles, Tuscany, sort of, Santa Monica, Cuzco, and, well, those. And then the other games like Domaine, Cosmic Encounter, Downforce, Wingspan, and Rising Sun, which are games that have sat around for varying lengths of time and eventually move on. Until next time, I am Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video. Which of these games am I most wrong about? Rising Sun? Probably Rising Sun, right? Until next time, have a good one.